Hey, like usual, be aware that this is a spoiler-filled video. If you haven't played up to this point, don't watch this. Like seriously, don't. As I usually say, ignore all the promo material, don't listen to the fan base, go into the game as blind as possible, and make up your own mind. Feel free to check back after you've played it yourself. Or you spoiled it yourself, I guess. Also, I'm not editing all that. Nope, not happening. You'll see footage that may not perfectly match the current subject, so keep that in mind. The Legend of Heroes Kai no Kiseki, Farewell O Zemiria, or Trails to Yume. Unlike the two previous games, as I wrote this, I was having trouble putting my thoughts together about this one. Unlike the two previous games, I streamed this one live. I think there is some correlation and causation there. But also, this game certainly makes things more complicated than it's ever been in this series. So in order to complete this, I actually had to go back and rewatch several scenes, especially in the finale. And after all that, I'm still not 100% sure on what I think. They ended this one in a way that can allow them to take the story in so many different ways. It's almost too convenient. Like, there are some serious concerns I have given they went back to old tropes and conventions throughout the game, and it makes it easy to lament the future of the series to a degree. It has the potential to be utterly awful. It also has the potential to be absolutely amazing, and I hope that's what happens, but you know, lowest expectations and all that. If you've seen the previous videos, you know what to expect. But this video will be much longer because the things we learned throughout this game are much more important to go over. Unlike Daybreak 2, which felt like we were just being given the runaround for most of the game. We'll start from the beginning, talk about whatever is relevant or stand out or whatever, and finish off with some other random thoughts and stuff. But first, if you decide to play the version that I did, with the English fan translation patch, keep in mind that the patch is still technically unfinished, and probably will remain that way forever. It was created by some Anons on 4chan, and well, they kinda stopped working on it since the official version was announced, so don't expect it to get updated any further. Fortunately, all the important stuff is complete, so you'll only notice some untranslated moon runes here and there in two places, some non-essential NPC dialogue, and the tutorial pop-ups. The latter of which is kind of a problem because this game introduces some new mechanics that won't make sense until you do some trial and error. And even more unfortunately, some of those untranslated moon runes are the bonus SP requirements for certain boss fights, so have fun with that. I sure didn't. Aside from that, for the main story, everything flows pretty naturally, so it's easy to just get into the story like you normally would. Speaking of which, let's talk about that prologue. We're going to space, Kiseki bros. And to drill that point home, they show us this exact same rocket launch sequence twice. I don't know why. Are they sneaking in one of those causality things again? I don't know. But in typical Falcom fashion, they do like to waste our time with the way cutscenes flow. They've gotten better at it, but it's still easily noticeable. Next, we're taken to Ored State for the first time, although we're mostly just visiting a Marduk facility. When we do get control, we have Van, Ferry, and Brigard training in a virtual or augmented reality simulation thing. This whole segment is basically made to reintroduce us to the main cast, some of the returning cast, and the battle mechanics in a fairly quick way, and it works. Except for the whole moon runes thing. While we're on the topic, I'll talk about the gameplay a bit. It's more or less the same as Daybreak 2, with some balance changes and a few mechanics, as well as a returning one. One of them called ZOC basically allows you to freeze time temporarily in field battles, allowing you to beat the crap out of everyone and there's nothing they can do about it. It feels kinda cheap, to be honest. The games aren't all that difficult to begin with, though on Nightmare mode it'll only take like 1 or 2 hits to force you into command battles at later parts of the game, so you're meant to abuse it as much as you can. I tended to forget the mechanic even existed for most of the game, so I kinda screwed myself over in some instances. And I think one of the reasons why is that the mechanic was relegated to holding down the right thumbstick, which is a terrible thing to do, and there's no way to change it in this version of the game. In fact, the control options are rather lacking in general. There's a lot of things you can't change for some reason. I don't know if this will be better when the Western port comes out, but it would be nice. The other new one is called Awakening, which gives your controlled character a huge power-up at the cost of the boost gauge. So we get to use certain super forms in action combat for the first time, such as Judith's Grim Cats, Reen and Shizuna's Spirit Unification, the Dominion's Stigmas, and later on, Van's Grendel form, and it was pretty satisfying. You can deploy command battles to start the first turn with the character in the awakened state too. The ZOC mechanic also transfers to command battles, which allows you to spend 2 boost gauge units to give your certain character an extra turn. The last addition is called Shard Commands, which are basically just Brave Orders from Cold Steel. They also cost boost gauge, so basically, figuring out ways to keep that boost gauge filled and not blowing your load too early was the key to winning in this game. Overall, the combat is still fun. I never really got bored of it throughout the game because you're constantly evolving and improving your characters and strategies, keeping it fresh throughout. Unlike Daybreak 2, which overstays its welcome and starts to feel tedious towards the end and especially the post-game. Oh, but there's no post-game in this one, unfortunately. Or fortunately. Depends on how you look at it, I guess. Anyway, back to what we're really here for. The other characters we got reintroduced to are Reen, Altina, and Kevin, and it was not just a good member berries party, it was also a good way to show how much variety there is in the game's team compositions and gameplay, which I'll get into later. Both teams eventually meet up and then we get reintroduced to even more characters: Cassim, Maribel, Rusette, Crow, Rufus, and Lapis. And everyone gets to fight each other. Yay. All part of a day's usual Trails combat test, right? Next, they all get to meet up in Marduk's super fancy break room thing, but not before we get to see some flashbacks, including that second rocket launch viewing that I mentioned. The next part is spent just having Van talk to everyone. I spent about an hour here, because I've always liked it when a bunch of main characters meet up and you just get to interact with as many of them as you want. Oh yeah, then we get to watch the rocket launch a third time. Did I mention we're going to space, bros?
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by Erebonia. Space!
But yeah, this one's different because they show a test dummy for an assault frame that will be in there for the big event later in the game. Much later in the game. Over 100 hours later in the game. You know what that means? Filler time. They also introduce us to the main Ouroboros members of this game, well before they're relevant. In my Daybreak 2 video, I said that they blew their load way too early by doing the same thing, showing off all the villains and spoiling their involvement way too early. This is true here too, but to a much lesser degree. But speaking of spoilers, anime opening time! Let's spoil half the game anyway! I really wish they would stop treating this series like an anime. It's a video game. The whole point is to play it. We're supposed to earn those interesting plot points and stuff. I think I looked away from the screen while this was playing, but it probably wouldn't have changed much since a lot of that was in the first reveal trailer and promotional stuff as well. For the love of God, stop doing this. This is not a game that's meant to be advertised to newcomers by showing them the first and last 1% of the game where all the actual shiny action stuff happens, so stop treating it like that. You could show us literally nothing of the next game, and literally everyone who is invested in the series will play it anyway. And they will probably like it so much more because they won't be able to see anything coming. You know what? Tangent time. Maybe this is just me. I think I just hate anime. This may come as a surprise since I've made so much content on this series and talk about Japanese games a lot, but I literally don't watch anime or read manga at all. I've been thinking about it for quite a while, and it seems like a lot of the things that annoy me about this series has to do with anime conventions or things you only see in these kinds of Japanese games. Like how they still feel the need to take you out of the experience by displaying the character names and their voice actors while they stand there awkwardly for 5 seconds even though most of them are characters we already know. Or those silly question or exclamation marks that appear over everyone's heads even though they are able to show these expressions on their faces quite easily now, and they even do that immediately after using these silly icons pretty frequently. Or all the slice of life stuff you have to engage with despite something dire clearly about to go down that is clearly only shoved into certain parts of the game to pad out the runtime. Or the way action scenes play out, how everyone stands in monologues for 10 times the amount of time they spend fighting. I don't know. Maybe I was misled when I got into this series. The main reason I latched onto it in the first place was that I was hopeful for an actual chronology of games set in an interesting world full of lore and history and magic and stuff, but we're really only drip-fed that kind of content throughout each game compared to the amount of time actually spent in them. I tolerated quite a lot to get here, but it's getting harder to do that without openly cringing. While we're on the topic, another thing I wanted to mention was something I had written down after finishing the prologue. Virtual reality segment, again, showing the technological advancement is moving way too fast. In previous videos, I mentioned I don't like how this series is going straight into modern and sci-fi territory, despite only 6 in-game years ago feeling like the equivalent of a post-industrial revolution, and now things have advanced into modern tech more or less, with a few places like Marduk having straight-up far-future sci-fi tech. It felt like they wanted to make the series more relatable to modern life for whatever reason, even at the cost of believability. Like, in order to advance technology that much, there would have to be some sort of anomaly that allowed certain breakthroughs. This actually does get explained. I was kinda shocked. In fact, a lot of things that happen the way they do make a bit more sense with some new context, but that's for later. Oh yeah, in between each act we get to watch Ouroboros' channel, which... oh man, we'll talk about that later too. So, now that all the interesting stuff is over, time to do what we usually do in these games. Patrol around town, getting side quests, and engaging in filler content, which the game punishes you for not doing. Yes, I'm choosing to reframe this aspect of the game in this way because a lot of this game's side quests are straight up dull, and not doing them means missing a lot of neat missable rewards, and achievements which also give you nice rewards, meaning whatever you miss can screw you over in the long run. Every now and then we get something interesting, but aside from that, you'll spend most of your time doing fetch quests for the locals for things that aren't super important. I will give them credit for giving a lot of the side quests plot points that relate to the main story though. However, this game in particular eventually gives you a potential slap in the face for doing all of this, which I'll talk about later too. The Law-Gray Chaos alignment system is back, and about as pointless as Daybreak 2, meaning nothing in the main story changes based on your alignment at all. I did see one scene that may be different based on one of your choices in Daybreak 1 if you transfer save data, but I don't know if this is actually a thing. Would be nice though. So what actually happens this chapter? Not much, to be honest, aside from exploring some new parts of Edith we haven't seen in-game yet, and being reintroduced to Yume, the most powerful character in the game. Everything is super vague, and the only new thing we get introduced to are corrupt beings in the form of monsters with their own status buff, I guess. I don't know what it actually does because moon runes. But one thing I do know is that each of these types of enemies have massively inflated HP to the point where boss fights drag. In the first half or so of the game, you don't have enough resources to mitigate this either because one of the key ways to make your characters more effective is through shard skills you gain through the orbment menu, most of which you can't even get until much later, unless you choose to spend hours grinding for more slots. So yeah, this part of the game really sucks for that reason, as well as all the time-consuming filler. So what's the best part of this act? Generally, it's the little hints of important things regarding certain characters that get drip-fed to us, that we're supposed to keep in the back of our mind until later. For example, when fighting these corrupt beings, Reset seems to be having some sort of strange reaction that makes her unusually exhausted. And then whenever that happens and a monster targets her in the cutscene, we get a usual, "that won't be necessary" moment to save her. That's our Falcom. Another interesting part is when Yorda... is it Yorda or Jorda? Or is it still supposed to be Yolda? I don't know. I still haven't played the English versions, and you know what? I don't care. She tags along with Van because she got separated from her twin brother and wants help finding him, but she tries really hard not to get attached, but you know, Van is just too charming after all. When they do happen to find him, he's in control of that same cloaked corrupt monster that they came across earlier, and he has what looks like a Genesis device but isn't, but allows him to do things like mind control a bunch of people into becoming part of the AD cult.
Oh shit, here we go again.
This cult subplot kind of falls off in the middle of the game, so it's not really worth bringing up again. This act also introduces us to Grimgarden, the sequel to Martian Garden, which, if you remember from the last video, I mentioned I noped out of during the post-game because of how tediously dull it was. This time it got taken over by Ouroboros, so they made a new creepypasta version for us to conveniently have to complete as we go along. It's things like this that kind of make it hard to take this story seriously, especially since now that it's run by Ouroboros, they're just going to toy with the protagonists while teasing them with little tidbits of information about their grand plans because I guess that's just what you do if you're an actual alleged villain, I guess. It does get tiring after a while how every fateful confrontation, if you will, plays out in this similar annoying way. Villains tease the main characters. Main characters make cringy motivational speeches. Villains laugh or get triggered. Battle. Battle ends with a stalemate for the 69th time in a row in a cutscene. Villains foo-foo and give hints at stuff and then teleport away. This kind of shit happens a lot in this game, so it feels like we're just being dragged around pointlessly for most of the story. Then the major load is saved for the very end. I guess the point is to keep you guessing throughout the game because of what actually happens, but man, it's still annoying. Speaking of which, Act 1. Act 1 gives us so little main plot information that by the time it was over, it was impossible for me to even try to predict where it could be going, aside from the safe assumption that it would play out like a typical Falcom game, and aside from the very few things that got spoiled for me before playing, which I'll bring up when relevant. Act 2, the first segment where the story splits up into 3 parts. Reen's route, Van's route, and Kevin's route. Based on the route selection screen, it appeared certain routes play out at certain times of the day, and in this one, it looked like it plays out in alphabetical order, so I started with Route A, Reen. Oh boy, here we go, the return of the illustrious ha-ha harem shit schoolboy himself, Reen Bean. So this part is basically where Reen and Crow are summoned to take part in assault frame training, since they have their super robots from Reverie which were modeled after the Divine Knights. Alright, that's a very believable reason to bring them back now, right? And Reen was inevitable since Shizuna's around in Calvard too, I suppose.
You need to goon.
But yeah, they go to the military base near Basel, which is one of the best towns in Calvard in my opinion. Despite this chapter being pretty boring otherwise, I can forgive quite a bit because just being able to play around this location makes up for it. Toa, Fee, and Altina also tag along, and Mint is also back since she's helping out with the machines and putting her silly Tism to good work. But before that, of course, they have to take on some Spriggan work via Fee contacting Van so that the gameplay works here, I guess. I don't know why they couldn't just let us do bracer work instead, but I guess it wouldn't make sense since our SP is for the Spriggan ranks anyway, but oh well. We get some side quests and extra activities that are just meant to provide us with many member berries of Class 7. Oh yeah, they also now have a part to play in conquering the Grim Garden because of course, the next floor is conveniently locked by 3 routes. Haha. Imagine that. Anyway, this leads us to have our giant robot fights against a couple of soldiers in assault frames, and then the Excalibur, the Republic's secret weapon, and potential key to manned space travel, piloted by Amelia Harling, also known as Hermes, who is also the commander's daughter. This battle was kinda boring, not gonna lie. You have what's basically a 50% healing command with no limits to it, so the only way you can lose this fight is if you don't spam it. Which I didn't do the first time because I didn't realize it was unlimited and Crow got KO'd. And there was no way to repair, so I had to restart this fight. It would take forever with just one character, but it's doable, I think. Even on Nightmare, which means I don't think this new robot battle system was thought out very well. But since there's only one like this the entire game, it's whatever. If the battle system was better, it would have been nice to see more of these fights, but they would have to be shoehorned in somehow. Like, an easy way to do that would be to have a few side quests with them. But we get nothing instead. Oh well. That's basically it for this route, aside from Amelia acting like a slut. She was like, "Alright boys, I'm the harem protagonist now. Way to go, Falcon." In Van's route, they continue investigating anomalies in Edith. That's all I wrote down for the first part. I didn't remember anything else that happened, so I had to go back and check. Oh yeah, Shizuna shows up out of nowhere.
Go away.
Guess I wanted to forget about this one. This route is also when I had the game lock up on me for talking to a black cat. Ironic. Probably a glitch that comes with the fan patch, so keep this in mind if you like to talk to NPCs. I remember another one happening where I talked to that girl in the fancy hotel in the Sidon district as well. You know, the rich girl that wants to be Delinquent Eddie's lolly wife or whatever.
Interesting.
Bermati had a unique Connect event where he reads tarot cards to Van, which is a throwback to Trails in the Sky when Sherazard would do the same thing. It basically serves to give extremely non-subtle but vague foreshadowing just like it did in the past. But the main story picks up again when they go to an auction where one of those fake Genesis thingies is going up, where they actually allow you to bid on a couple of really good accessories as well. It's worth winning those auctions, so do it. But then the fake Genesis is stolen by fake Grim cats. That clown, Rosalie. She leads us into the underground of the theater where they create some sort of augmented reality zone similar to Marduk, which is like, okay, sure. We follow it to the end and are greeted by Campanella, Rosalie, and a new Ouroboros face, Simeon. Well, new if you ignored all the promo material at least. Rosalie joined Ouroboros too as one of their lackeys, basically playing the same role as Gilbert in this part of the story. Someone in my chat said that she and Gilbert should never breed. That child would be the ultimate disaster.
He's out of line, but he's right.
Anyway, this was one of the boss battles where I missed the SP requirement because I didn't know what I was supposed to do since it was in moon runes again. I could have just reloaded and tried again until I figured it out, and I may have done that if I wasn't streaming, but I decided against it. At this point in the game, boss fights were still dull slogs that took forever, so I didn't want to. After the fight, Shizuna tries to 1v1 Simeon, but he gives her quite a challenge despite her being an OP Mary Sue, but Van stops them. Campanella just gives Van the Genesis replica because, I don't know. Then they monologue about the Orpheus final plan and teleport away like they always do. Please let the next part be more interesting, I was thinking at the time, since I thought I was saving the best for last. Kevin's route, along with Rufus and Lapis, meet up with Swin and Nadia in Tharbad. Hilarity ensues because Lapis and Nadia are Lapis and Nadia. But they all get roped into Kevin's mission, which he is quite hush-hush about, at least the real details of it. There was a side quest about human trafficking. Again. Aside from that, I found that I don't really like Tharbad all that much. We spend quite a bit of time there, but it's not that interesting of a town, at least. It becomes more interesting later on, but other than that, not much going for it. And I tend to enjoy desert themes quite a bit. I think it has to do with Daybreak 1's Tharbad segment being ultimately pretty forgettable and lame story-wise. A lot of the side stuff references this plotline, so it was hard to get invested here. Until we get to the main draw, Kevin's mission, which leads him into the water control underground zone by using the Akashic Eye, given to him by Nina to look into the past by reading the world's memories or something. First, he wants to test the rest of the party by having them fight him with both his stigmas active. Then he uses the Akashic Eye to witness Dingo Brad meeting up with Hamilton, where she admits she has done something potentially terrible and messed with causality somehow. So, Kevin is taking up the mantle of Heretic Hunter again, for now, and he's searching for Hamilton. It was pretty simple putting 2 and 2 together here, so this route started out being the most amusing, to the most dull, to the most interesting. Then we have the intermission where everyone comes together in Grimgarten to unlock the next floor. Using Van, Reen, Kevin, and Rufus as your party made things pathetically easy because of how broken they are. The boy band squad, as my chat called it. At the end, we are formally introduced to Simeon, and F. Novartis makes his return as the leader behind all the Grimgarten shenanigans. And he acts all creepy towards the girls in the party. And Quatre. And even Van. A weird way to reintroduce him, but okay. We do learn a little more about the technology of Marduk being unusually advanced, which is how Roy came into contact with Ouroboros in the past, and that there is something deep in the garden that Novartis is trying to obtain, and that something may be related to Mare. And that's about it for the intermission, aside from unlocking a hub space where everyone can interact with each other. We also got memory orbs, which give us a look into some of the characters' pasts, kinda like how Sky the Third and Reverie does it. But aside from the first one, I'd put this off for as long as I could because, well, some of those memory segments were some of my least favorite parts of those games, so I just didn't want to do them. What I didn't know was that all of them were super short and don't overstay their welcome, so whoops. They also let you view any Connect events you miss, so there's no point in worrying about not having enough points anymore. A good thing for gameplay reasons, but strange in terms of immersion and believability. Resuming Act 2, we have a choice between Reen and Van, but despite Van being the second option, his route starts way earlier, so I decided to go with his first. They resume investigating anomalies around town, which includes a side quest involving subliminal messaging.
They're fucking with me,
Eventually, they are led to Darklight District, where everything is going nuts, and this is probably the most violent scene in the entire game. Pin that for later. They end up chasing Ix out to Dirk Memorial Park, where we finally get to visit the last section of it full of medieval ruins and stuff, and that goddamn turtle boss is back! Gotta do it for the SP. This fight took 45 minutes, and it felt like longer than that. Turns out this was a result of my own doing, and my characters were underpowered all this time. More on this later. What I didn't know was that this boss would be transferred over to the Grimgarten Arena afterwards, so I didn't even have to deal with it then. Thanks for that. Anyway, this next boss sequence with Ix and the Corrupt Executor thing was where I really started to groan with annoyance. It pretty much filled almost every trope of Trail's boss encounters in one go. Ix being a little shit, taunting the party, getting interrupted by the protagonist's virtuous platitudes, Ix having a little exclamation mark pop up above his head and then laughing it off, then starting the boss fight taking forever because of inflated enemy HP, a stalemate cutscene afterwards, more platitudes, off-screen enemies saving the day for Ix suddenly, a bunch of mysterious mumbo-jumbo speeches while they have the lives of our protagonists in the palms of their hands. That won't be necessary moment when the rest of the allies show up, and then the enemies teleporting away once they spout a few more cryptic nonsenses. I hated this. Yorda had to suffer for this just so they could find a lead on where Ix went. And those new enemies, the remnants, it was spoiled for me who one of them was, but it wasn't any of the three that showed up here. The Apostle was impossible to tell at first. The martial artist I also didn't know who it could be, but they made it obvious he has something to do with Eren. But the soldier, I assumed it was Ida from Daybreak 1. Like, the only thing I knew was that some characters were somehow revived for these beings. But I didn't know that not all of them were characters we'd been introduced to before. Needless to say, my opinion of the game dropped quite a bit after this part. They'd have to pull off something crazy to justify what I thought they were doing, again, and returning the series to a world with no stakes or consequences because nobody is allowed to die, nor is anything bad allowed to happen on screen anymore. And when it does, you just know that it's going to be undone or bailed out somehow, no matter what happens. Again, keep a pin on this for later. So let's ease our worries by going back to Reen's route. Surely this can't be worse. Well, again, we gotta run around Basil and enjoy some more fluff and Class 7 member berries, of course, but at least seeing Celis embarrass herself in the Racing Queen outfit was amusing. So this segment leads them to the observatory at the Basil Institute, partially motivated by Toa's grandfather having been involved with astronomy, which I thought maybe there would at least be an Easter egg reference to Nayuta here since his last name is also a Herschel, but I didn't notice anything. Which, by the way, I have to admit, when I played Nayuta, my chat and I treated it kinda like a giant meme, because it kinda is, so I don't remember any of the finer details. I think if there was something that stuck out to me that relates its story to Zemiria, I'd notice it, but I don't know. Is there really a connection, or is it still just speculation at this point? Sound off in the comments if you want, because I'd like to know. I don't really plan to revisit that game anyway, except for the meme videos. Back on topic, when Reen and Crow look through the telescope, they see something that isn't the night sky. Weird. I assumed that their link to the Divine Knights is what causes them to see things differently at this point, but didn't know why. Then they get contacted by Leon and Celis out of nowhere to investigate beneath the observatory where the actual processor unit of the telescope is. So there's another one of those Middle Ages ruins beneath the Institute, because of course there is. Do they just put these things wherever it's convenient for the story and gameplay? I don't know. While we're on the topic, these dungeons have been poorly designed in recent games, when it would serve the story and lore better to make them look like they were once actually functional and useful or just lived in, you know? Not just the similar haphazard layout that was designed only to be a video game combat dungeon zone thing each time. You know what I mean? Like, what the heck is the point of these places when they are so bizarrely laid out from a practical perspective? Did the ancients build these places knowing that some player-controlled protagonists would traipse around fighting just enough random monsters to be trained well enough to defeat whatever boss lay in wait at the end, hundreds of years into the future? You know, given that there are so many moments like that in the story already, I wouldn't be surprised. The only reason I bring this up is because of the nature of this series in particular. It's supposed to be a series where the lore matters, right? So things should be designed to accommodate that first and foremost. If I'm storming a castle, I want to feel like I'm in a damn castle, not an illogical layout of random rooms with a castle skin on it. Anyway, at the end of this place, they find the processor of the telescope, and using some Takno Jutsu to trick the AI core, they find out that what they saw may actually be the real image of space, which means... well, we'll get to that later. But then they get interrupted by Shizuna and the feds for a boss fight with very easy SP requirements, all things considered. But yay, we get to watch Reen and Shizuna have their weeb fight.
I'm gooning it. I'm gooning it so good. You need to goon. Reen, goon. Oh yes, for power.
But then they finish and learn that the Aurora unit here is creating fake images in all telescopes across Zemiria via the Orbital Network, which is kinda crazy. The sky is fake, more or less. And the world is surrounded by a weird void. Oh, and then Mint saves the day with Prince Sharad's Sepith gem arts. You know, maybe Mint should have been in Class 7 too. Then maybe the Cold Steel series would have been a better comedy than it already is. Make her playable in Kai too. Do it. Next, we go back to Van's route, and I was thinking, ah shit, here we go again. Because I thought it would lead us to another stupid remnant battle, but no. This one is just a short night chapter, starting with some really cute scenes of Van, Yume, and Paulette taking care of Yorda. So Van goes on a night patrol and Agnes decides to tag along. Oh, I see how it is. There's quite a lot of romantic tension throughout this chapter, and it's clearly only going one way. This is gonna be cringe, isn't it? Well, first we have a distraction in Blacklight where we do a little side quest to help reconstruction, and also fight a random boss so that Gao Long can get some screen time so he feels like less of a pointless character. This whole chapter climaxes with Agnes talking to Van on the rooftop of Montmartre where she actually says it, that she loves him. Well, good on her for actually shooting her shot rather than continually teasing it for the entire series, right? Unfortunately, Van has to turn her down, in the most Van way possible. To be honest, I actually really liked this scene. For Agnes, it was a natural progression. She'd been becoming more open and brave the more time she spent with the Spriggans, and seeing her take that leap was kinda special. I felt good for her. But since Van turned her down, for similar reasons he keeps Elaine at arm's length, I felt sorry for her too. And this is something I didn't expect. Me caring about Agnes at all, because for the previous 2 games she was just kind of an okay character to me. Always just there and not really being all that interesting. As for Van, I knew he would turn her down. It wouldn't make sense otherwise, given he's still struggling with his own demons. I always thought it would be best for him if he got back together with Elaine, but now, I don't know. I guess for now he'll keep being the harem protagonist because of course. Oh yeah, Nina shows up and says some vague stuff. She admits even her Akashic eyes can't read what's happening in the coming chapters, so we're in for a ride. Hopefully. Now it's time for Act 3 proper, and I decided to go back to Kevin's route where we see Kevin collaborating with Ashlad of Iscariot, meaning this is serious business. And the picnic squad gets him to admit that he's hunting down Hamilton, so naturally, Kevin and Rufus go to the strip club, because why not? Haha. So yeah, time to investigate Tharbad's water solution from 20 years ago, that nobody else in town remembers either for some reason. Oh, and we have to deal with that annoying swindler, Magisa, again. She'll never learn, so we'll see her again, unfortunately. The investigation leads them below Vegas Films, another conveniently reused location. Or so I've thought, but this one has a different layout, I think. They find another AI core, which they use some talk no jutsu on, like in Reen's chapter, to get information out of it. Though instead of a boss fight, the AI makes Lapis do a hacking minigame. Okay. So now we gotta go to the desert again, and now we have some C-tier characters on our tail because for some reason they kinda know everything about Kevin's intentions already, I guess. This leads us to the place Hamilton used to manipulate the local climate, a tower from before the Great Collapse. Oh, finally! We're digging into the deep history of this world. About time. Right? Okay, really, we were just going there to learn what Hamilton did, but not before one of the funniest scenes in the game, where they escape the underground facility into the strip club. Nadia, never change. Once they get to the control room of the tower, they have an arbitrary fight with Ouroboros, which, by the way, it looks like Simeon's Imaginator power is an excuse for Falcom to throw in reused fights of old bosses. Even more so than they already do. Oh boy. So yeah, this confirms that Hamilton altered causality via those replicas and the tower's functionality to create Tharbad's water supply using water from the future. Then they escape Ouroboros with a Deus Ex Machina in the form of Nina, because of course. This chapter did leave me with a few theories, so it was interesting to think about. Like for example, was Hamilton's manipulating time the catalyst for the impending apocalypse by the year 120X as per Epstein's journal? Was her environmental manipulation one of the greatest contributors to the desertification of the East, maybe? Can these replica devices harness the sept-terrion of time's power like the Genesis allegedly can? Is that how those remnants got their abilities like their space-time teleporting? There wasn't enough to go on yet, but it was starting to get interesting. Back at Van's route for 3 chapters in a row. Yay. But at least we finally get a new location to do all our stuff in, right? Anchorville is a nice town, but the music theme they chose for it was strange. Other than that, this first part was pretty uneventful, except at the end when we find another one of those remnant goons and they made it pretty obvious who it was. But that's only because I saw a spoiler image of this early, and I was like, you gotta be shitting me. Who else are they gonna bring back in this ridiculous game? Are we Cold Steel 4ing again, but this time for the villains? Oh yeah, Yoon Ka-fai finally introduces himself after being seen randomly in other parts of the game, which were amusing, and he reminded me of Master Roshi from Dragon Ball quite a lot. Anchorville Investigation Part 2 is at night, with not much happening until the end. Although we did get a peek at Reset's potential psychological trauma issues in her Connect event at the church, which left me with more questions than answers really. So the climax of this chapter is a rehash of the Red Mist thing at Langport in the first game, with the battle against the remnants revealing who they are for real this time. One of them is Ragun Khan, who was the tyrant of Langport, and the other is goddamn Giacomo, the nobody who got offed in the prologue of the first game. Yeah, nobody stays dead in this series apparently. What's next? Are they gonna bring back Dingo Brad and all the villains that were killed in Daybreak 1?
It's funny you should say that.
Anchorville Part 3 started off with a very rewarding side quest involving a character named Fabio, who appeared earlier in the game too, but this was his most important moment. Basically, he acts as what he thinks a Spriggan like Van does, but he's way more chaotic evil about it and risks damaging Van's reputation. I thought this kind of side plot was a good idea, but it could have been executed better. Like Fabio could have been a temporary party member for parts of the main story since he's trying to be like a Spriggan, only for Van to cut him off after a while. Something that doesn't get wrapped up in just a short side quest worth of time, you know? Or maybe, just maybe, those La Grey Chaos options could influence how you deal with him. But you know, that would require this system to be useful in the first place. We'll get to that. There was also a Connect event with Shizuna, despite her not being in the party for this chapter. Here we go. She wants to fight again, and I expected this to be a pain since this time she's possessed by demonic powers. But no, this fight was pathetically easy, like the easiest fight in the entire game, and it was no contest. But there's a reason for that, I think, which I'll get to later as well. At least this part finally gave us a reason to accept her ridiculousness. She's been in the possession of a demon sword that may be an artifact? We don't know yet. But she is the only one who can keep it under control at the moment, and she becomes part of Van's harem semi-officially. Because of course. Moving on, this chapter gets a little crazy because Harwood's back, so you already know some wild shit's gonna go down. By the way, it should be mentioned that it looked hilarious whenever he was on screen. Because this being the port of the game that is sold in China, Harwood's cigar was censored and replaced with a cinnamon stick. It just looks funny, especially when Burgard grabs it from him and tells him not to disrespect the church they meet up at. Yeah, cinnamon is heretical, my dudes. If you like cinnamon, you better repent. Anyway, I like the little detail he let out that he was responsible for the side quest monster from earlier, which you might have noticed uses one of Harwood's exclusive status effects in battle. There's a few more interesting little tidbits that he gives us though, like mentioning that he was working with number 5 and number 12, two enforcers we haven't met yet. I wonder if this is foreshadowing the next game. It's not very subtle if so. They are described as a lazy old guy and a martial artist lady respectively, but that's all we got. Aside from that, the rest of what he tells us is vague, like that whatever's about to happen will shake the world to its core, but does give us more confirmation that time manipulation is at play with the remnants. And then time freezes like in the Pandemonium in the first game.
Oh shit, here we go again.
So, time to fight back, with Harwood joining us as a guest member. Oh yeah, this should be fun. You could tell that if he was a controllable character, he'd be extremely useful. Most of his crafts hit a massively wide range and cause all sorts of status effects. I don't think they'll ever let us take control of non-defecting Ouroboros members though, unfortunately. When they get into the city hall, it reacts to Van's replica and resets body? Then the city hall is altered into a ruined state suddenly, as if 50 years of neglect had passed. Then Reset says she recognizes the place and goes into shock. At this point I had the theory that Reset's body was made with future tech in one of those replicas. Turns out I wouldn't be too far off, but the monsters in this area were made with bio-nanomachines. Sounds like a decent correlation if you ask me. Oh yeah, we got to save Lloyd's uncle. How about that? We get to the top and have a painful, time-consuming boss fight. And yeah, of all people, the masked apostle is Melchior. Because of course it is. But turns out I was wrong about the female soldier being Ida. I don't know who she is. Anyway, I was mostly focused on being salty about who these remnant characters were that I forgot most of what was said after the boss fight, even though it was pretty important. And I couldn't look back at my stream because it went past the 12-hour mark and got cut off. Thanks, YouTube. I know you guys probably don't care about this, but 1, too bad, and B, it's relevant to my experience because these remnant characters were such a disappointment that it drowned out anything else that was happening. So I had to beat the boss again to see the scene again. Yeah, I could have just looked up someone else's gameplay, but where's the fun in that? But basically, all we learn is that the remnants were there to create a wedge, whatever that's supposed to mean, and that there is a grand plan set in motion by Hamilton and several others, including Dominique and Agnes. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Agnes left at the start of this chapter at the command of her father, the president. But with all that serious stuff out of the way, time to go back to Rien. Hot Springs time! Also, at this point in the game, I started getting annoyed at everyone for talking about food so much. The game has several moments that made me hungry, damn it. Aside from the fluff content, there isn't exactly a whole lot happening here. The whole thing was mainly to build up Rien's showdown with Yun Ka-Fai. There was a meeting with Rocksmith, Gian Liu, and Kilika, but they don't tell us much, and then Walter and Zin show up. Oh look! Walter, Zin, and Kilika all back at their former dojo together for the first time in forever? Surely this is where their subplot gets resolved, right? Haha. Well, for reasons, they're gonna help us together, so I guess their feud is just kind of non-existent at this point. Honestly, I don't really get these two anymore. We did get a few tidbits on the Master Bracer, Arnold Evans, who is Cassius Sr. Guess we'll meet him next game. Right? Oh yeah, this was the part where I missed a side quest on my initial playthrough. This actually made me miss out on a pretty important achievement reward driver, which then made me miss the achievement for getting all drivers. Annoying. Well, time to scale Kunlun. We got ninjas to push through to get to Yun Ka-Fai, and we got help from the Chinese bootleg ninjas. And then we gotta fight him, of course. Why? Because like normal in this series, he knew everything that would happen, and now wants to test Rien because we don't know exactly yet. This whole 8 leaves 1 blade concept still remains kind of an enigma after 13 games, aside from the fact that it's a swordsmanship style. But there's clearly supposed to be something more significant about it that can take on the Black God that Shizuna wields, I guess.
I am gooning it! I am gooning it so good! You need to goon! Rien goon! Oh yes, the power!
Anyway, this boss fight was probably one of the most dangerous fights in the game. Yun Ka-Fai is ridiculously overpowered, and you can get screwed early if he moves first and uses a move that seemingly targets everyone no matter what and does one-shot damage on Nightmare mode if you're not prepared. I had to keep that shield shard command on at pretty much all times. There is one thing in your favor though. He will not use shard commands of his own like most other major bosses did, so it pretty much boiled down to an overall fairly simple battle of endurance. Crow died, because he always does. In fact, he may have been the character that died the most in battle, fitting to be honest, but I managed to pull through even if it took 28 minutes. Oh yeah, Kurogane is also there. I mean, Kuga Ka-Fai. So he's Yun's great nephew, and yeah, he's there. He has some sort of eye power that we don't know anything about yet. For an arc so late in the series, they sure are introducing a lot of new concepts to this universe. So after, we get introduced to 2 more remnants, who are very obviously Ariok and Olympia. Yeah, this just seems like shameless asset reuse at this point. But Yun reveals he was working with Hamilton, and then... We're going to space, remember? But then they pull a Trails and...
Zero.
Oh. Really? You're gonna do this to me? Right, so we got Kevin's route next. We got to see his squires on his Merkaba for the first time since the Prologue of Sky the Third, I think? This chapter is all about them closing in on Hamilton's location, finally, and it's taking them to Krail Village, the former site of Krail Village. This chapter is going to be interesting, I thought. First, we got this depressing music while we fight the monsters on the destroyed countryside, and there's no battle theme. I don't remember if any other location did this with this kind of atmosphere. There were plenty that had action music like this, but not quiet or sad music. It set the scene for the type of story beats I look forward to. Emotional abuse in story form.
This is who I am.
Didn't take long for things to get real bad instead. I actually hated this chapter, and this next part is probably my least favorite cutscene in the entire game, followed by one of the most annoying boss fights in the entire game. Maybe some of this is lost in translation, but you can basically sum it up by a pointless back and forth of vague platitudes with nobody directly stating anything of substance. Do you want to stop Kevin from killing Hamilton or not? Like, please, just stop wasting our time. All this nonsense about resolve just so that they can have an excuse to throw another reused boss fight at us again. And with an SP requirement too. Don't let any of your characters get KO'd. When there's 2 support characters that will cancel your shard commands very frequently, and the 2 main opponents can S-break and wipe your party, and there may be nothing you can do about it. Oh yeah, and this fight took 36 minutes. Again, because I was probably underpowered, one of my characters got KO'd, so I said screw it and just finished the fight. Getting the SP wasn't worth it. More talk about testing themselves and whatnot, and after all that, you're calling it a draw. Shut up, Kevin. Shut up, Kevin. Shut up.
I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man.
Let's just move on. Krail, or what's left of it. We get to look around and talk to everyone and see what they think. The one that stood out to me was Director Gotti, who mentioned a statue that the church took from the village. There was also Lapis not understanding the emotions people feel in situations like this, so she's becoming more human over time it seems. Then she suddenly gets transported back in time. Or maybe one of those alternate realities created by one of those replicas? I don't know. I don't like where this is going though. I also don't like how casual all these characters are being when they know what Kevin's about to do. It just comes off as unbelievable. Oh well, here we go. First, they do everything they can to make you not want to kill Hamilton. She sings a song of prayer for Krail, then shows us via the replica how she knew Sheena Dirk, and worked with Epstein on Treon Tower, and how Epstein made Dominique the first Grimcats, and tells us how she made the replicas to alter causality, and stood by while the Genesis came into the hands of Almada, and basically admitted to all of her sins, and so much more. Damn, they're laying it on thick. Kevin's really gonna do it, huh? Nope, first we have a boss fight with Leon, Celis, Sherrod, and Najee. Somehow this fight was infinitely easier than the one I was bitching about earlier, and took a third of the time. That's our Falcom? Anyway, yeah, it looks like Kevin's actually gonna do it. And it looks like Swin and several others are about to protest right at the last minute because of course, but Kevin seems dead set on it.
That won't be necessary.
And here comes more of the remnants to stop them. However, these ones I could not recognize at all, but Hamilton seemed to know them. Yeah, figures this would happen. All that dramatic build-up for another dead end of the scene. One detail I did find interesting about this scene, though. Hamilton mentions Kevin likes to delay, to hesitate, which reminded me of something. Before we move on, I know, this video is very long-winded at this point, especially compared to my previous 2 Daybreak videos, but I hope you're enjoying it. There are so many more details that I picked up on in this game than previous games, and that may be just due to so many things coming together that might play an important role in the next game. This story is getting convoluted, much more so than previous Trails games, and we haven't even talked about what happens in the finale yet. I'd like to say I'm here for it, but I'm skeptical on how it will all play out due to this series' track record. You'll know what I mean later on. Oh, I guess one more thing that may be notable. There was a part where Ulrika appears to break the 4th wall, like, more so than the other Ouroboros channel things. Is that supposed to be the point of these things? To establish a connection to the player somehow? I don't like where this is going. We start off the finale relearning some of the stuff from Kevin's route from Judith's mom, and about the movements of Epstein, which made his death sound extremely suspicious. Something we don't know about yet that may have happened in Lamont's state that forced Hamilton and Lilia Claudel, Anya's grandmother, to flee to Calvard. It's all very suspicious. Le Mans State also happens to be the HQ of the Bracer Guild, where Arnold Evans is alleged to be visiting Calvert from in the near future. Was he involved somehow? That's a possible plot twist I can think of regarding the whole Epstein situation. Or it could be that Epstein had to do something similar to what Lilia and Sophie went through. There's still too much we don't know. Still, after 13 games. In fact, now that I bring it up, I want to reiterate that this game pretty much just drip feeds us scraps of details throughout the entire game up until this point. I know this sounds weird after how long this video has been so far, but even though we've spent so much time in the game already, there's still so many more questions than answers. Everything we get is so vague as to seemingly keep you on edge, but for me, it wasn't really working. I just wanted them to show me something of substance for a change. I don't want to edge. I want to goon.
You need to goon.
Probably the biggest, most interesting revelation up to this point to me was how Hamilton was manipulating causality somehow, and that she could potentially be causing irreparable damage to the world. I figured the sept-terrion of time was involved and is the source of the Genesee's power, and by extension those replicas, maybe, even though it's potentially been present since Daybreak 1 and still hasn't revealed itself. But we're at the finale now, and we need to be reminded that they're still going to space. So, here we go. Time to bust Agnes and Ren out of the presidential palace with the help of a bunch of high schoolers. What could possibly go wrong? Nothing at all, actually. Haha. We save Rennie and then continue into the underground of the presidential palace, and we're rejoined by Shitsuna. God damn it, not again.
Leave now and never come back!
So, this massive underground facility serves as the final dungeon, which isn't as magical or majestic or whatever as the previous game's final dungeons, and I was perfectly okay with that. It brought things back down to earth a little, and it works for this story. Apparently, time flows more slowly in this facility, which you only learn via pop-up dialogue as you explore. Ah, now certain things are starting to make sense. But before we go any further, time to take a little detour and do all the stuff I put off for so long. Yeah, the Grim Garden. I did finish each of the floors once, but that was it. I didn't S-rank all of them, I didn't view any of the memento orbs or remaining connect events, or finish the arena challenges, or get MVP with every character, or get the gambler achievements. Yeah, I put off a lot of stuff, and decided to do it all here. Well, some of it. The rest I had to be convinced to do right before beating the game by my chat. And yeah, they were right. There is no post-game in this one, so putting it off does you no favors anyway. The highlight of the memento orbs was probably the one that portrays what looks like Reset's past when she was young, which we got a glimpse of in her connect event in Anchorville. It's a good thing I saw this memento before the next boss fight too, which is a bunch of drones led by Mirabelle, which was unremarkable. But what she tells us, Reset was found when she was about 14 in a life support pod marked with the year 1259, 50 years after the current events in the story. So that makes her negative 36 years old. So you better stop looting her, she's underage. That's how this works, right? Shitty jokes aside, yeah. This was the key plot point I'd been unknowingly waiting for. The future tech of this pod is what allowed Marduk to advance in technology so rapidly over the past several years. Now it all makes sense. That combined with the possible time manipulation they are able to do, like with this facility under the Capitol, would allow for incredibly rapid advancement in much shorter periods of time than usual. Alright, my admittedly personal bias complaints about all the future tech in my previous videos have been addressed. Unbelievable. I underestimated this story, I suppose. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to get our girl back. Oh wait, she's gone. Yeah, apparently Dominique knows how to use that space-time teleportation just like the remnants, so they're both gone. Well, only one thing left to do, confront the president. Oh wait, there's still the Grimgarten final floor, which unlocks here at the last second. And confronting the president is the final point of no return, which fortunately the game makes very clear, so Grimgarten it is. First thing we get is a final arena battle against Demon Gerard and Auguste from the previous two games, and it was nothing, haha. Next, onto the true end of Floor 9, which is called Leguiarn's Chest. Unfortunately, this was one of the things that was spoiled for me before playing the game. I already knew what that name was in reference to, but it won't be fully relevant until later. The Ion fight at the end was also not very difficult, but what we get story-wise for getting here is a bit of a bombshell that seems to have Trails fans kinda divided. So here we have the sixth Anguis, Dr. F. Novartis, trying to hack into something of Marduk's while protecting himself with something called the Dirge of I don't fucking know. Which was that black wall. Kurdalagon happens to be a god of smiths in Ossetian mythology that originates from modern-day southwestern Russia, which is a culture I'd never heard of before, so that was interesting to learn. Anyway, a few revelations before this boss fight. He references a box that's safeguarded by the 5 noble houses of Valis, which means that they may be the ones who actually own Marduk. And this box was modeled after the goddess's treasure, which could mean they are using a replica of Legiarn's chest, the Sept-terrion of Time, or somehow tapping into its power and functionality, which is insane to think about, but considering how far in the future their tech is compared to literally everyone else, who knows? Novartis has been at it for 2,000 hours straight. Yeah, he's lost it. Or has he? This is probably Novartis' best moment in the entire series so far, because it actually turned him from a generic mad scientist villain into something more rounded and interesting. Ish. Depends on how you look at this whole plot twist here, because this is the part that has people divided. Novartis succeeds in extracting the data he wanted from something known as the Deep Abyss, which reveals that he was Epstein's sole disciple in the 19,998th period. But we know that Epstein only had 3 disciples, Russell, Schmidt, and Hamilton, so this is a contradiction in the current timeline, the 19,999th period, meaning the universe is caught in a time loop. To Novartis, this is a confirmation that he was real, that he did exist and did work under Epstein, even if the current disciples reject this, as they seem to do in one of those memento orb scenes, where they don't really know who he is. Burgard mentions this as a step recorded in one of the Apocrypha, the Book of Ladder. Would be nice to know more about these things, which is why people keep asking for a church arc for future games, I guess. I'd imagine this would be such a bizarre moment if you weren't paying close enough attention throughout the game and the rest of the series' little details, which is why you should play the games in order, just saying. If you haven't yet, what are you doing here? So Novartis then claims to want to take action based on his findings, but guess who shows up and stops him? The Grandmaster. Yeah, she pretty much just shows up, tells Novartis to go to bed because he really needs it, and says hello to the protagonist before teleporting away. I thought at first that we were getting a glimpse of one of her unknown powers, the power of suggestion or something like that. But upon reviewing the scene, I think Novartis was just doing what she says on his own. So she leaves, saying, "Until we meet again, beyond the turning of the world," which aligns with what Harwood said earlier about something shaking the world to its core. Things are about to get a little crazy, eh? Time to have a chat with the president. Oh wait, these two are back. Chat, I'm about to crash out. For real. Falcom, just retcon the Law Grey Chaos system out of existence. In case you forgot, in Daybreak 1, Van, and by extension we, get to choose whether to defend ourselves and our allies with lethal or non-lethal force. I chose the lethal option for all of them. Because chaos. And now they're all back. What the hell was even the point? You wasted your time putting it in the games. Why bother giving us the illusion of free choice if none of them even matter? Or is this all part of the... I guess I'll get to that in a bit. But apparently no, these two were revived via the same method Marduk revived Reset from her life pod, which is still somewhat vague, but I'm assuming it's the bio nanomachines that were mentioned earlier. But that's obviously not the important thing here. No, not the boss fight either. That was easy. Obviously, there is more to the space program than just getting people into space. They have a plan to save the world of Zemuria from the Cradle of Time, which is very obvious what that's referring to, and that those corrupted monsters as well as the remnants from earlier appeared in response to the threat of being destroyed. I really wish I hadn't been spoiled on this part. Would have made for a much more interesting reveal, but yeah, if they don't complete this mission, they predict the world will be reset by the next month. And then probably one of the dumbest justifications for a boss fight here. Van's all like, yeah, you're gonna delay this grand plan because my 4SPG and Anya's birthday and because I said so. Motherfucker, did you not listen to what's going on? And do you think you have the justification and authority to stop such a massive national project because of a birthday girl? And we're just supposed to go along with this because he's the main character. But naturally, one of Graham Hart's biggest motivations for doing all this was to save his daughter's future. I half expected Graham Hart to shift into a villain somehow, but instead, he's quite admirable in many ways. And at this very point, I was actually on his side rather than Van's. And of course, the little boss fight ends so that nobody wins, so Graham Hart's plan will move forward anyway. What we get next is a bunch of loading screens, a series of scenes that really builds the tension of what's about to happen. Emilia going to space for the future of the world to fight against the sept-terrion of time, Leguiarn's chest. Arguably the most powerful thing, being, deity in existence. That we know of, at least. And everyone learning the truth about the sky, that it's not real, and Hamilton knew and kept this from everyone this entire time. And space, which is a dark void that's either protecting or imprisoning the world. Or both. And we are also reminded that the continent is surrounded by an endless sea that cannot be crossed. Well, Emilia does indeed find the sept-terrion, which then analyzes its ground observation data and converts it to sin value. Then advances the Grand Reset by 45 days. So now the world has about 45 minutes left. Oh boy. Sin value, though. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And to fight it, they use modified versions of reactor weapons, similar to the one used to destroy Krail. But it's not taking it lying down, or just floating there either, as it sends out countless drones to defend itself and seemingly to attack Zemuria on the ground too. This is some real Independence Day shit, I tell you. And we get to battle them ourselves too. As Emilia, we have another mech fight. Yeah, if you remember what I said about the mech fights from earlier, same thing applies here. Cool, I guess, but underwhelming. This battle was extremely simple. I kinda wish they did more here, but it basically boils down to just safe heal whenever you want and keep the speed command on, even on nightmare mode. That's it. I said on stream I thought there might be a shoot 'em up segment or something instead. That would have been cool, I think. I guess the development of all those Magical Girl Elisa minigames weren't in preparation for moments like this after all. After this, Emilia guides 2 large nukes to the sept-terrion, which destroys its protective field and causes significant damage to the chest, and in response, it increases the sin value. Brigard mentions this sept-terrion is kept very secret by the Church, and is only mentioned in the Secret Book of Erictus, one of the apocryphal texts, which I don't think has been mentioned until now, but I could be wrong. But 6 more nukes, and the sept-terrion is actually destroyed. Ain't no way. Of course. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief a bit too early. A strange being appears, that Reen, Lapis, and others seem to recognize, and it blasts Emilia before she can do anything to react, sending her in a flaming wreck back down to Earth. Damn, there's no way she's surviving that. This shadowy being appears to resemble Zoa Gilstein, the Divine Knight created through Elysium in Trails into Reverie, but according to Rufus, not quite. Emilia's craft barrels to Earth right to where Kevin, Hamilton, and the others are, but then it vanishes and reappears as that statue. The one Kevin investigated from Krail 10 years prior. What the hell is happening? Now, it turns out there was something wrong with the Genesees, which appear to be unstable. Turns out Kincaid swapped them out, or made it so that they were there but not. Quantum overlap with the replicas. So he becomes enemy number 1 all of a sudden, and as he's being detained, claims to be the leader of the White Dawn, and becomes Grendel Shaddai. Yes, Renee Kincaid is our final boss. And this fight is definitely going to test you because he's easily the fastest character in the entire game. And speed is the most important stat in this entire series in general, actually. You will not outspeed him, even by using delay and the delay cutting speed commands, so basically the easiest way to deal with this fight is to keep a defense command on at all times. You can switch to speed if you have several turns in a row, but letting him attack with your defenses down will get you destroyed quickly. It's a decent final boss fight, all things considered, but the best part about it is in between phases, where he transports himself and Van to the moon.
I'm pissing on the moon!
Here you have to fight him one-on-one in a field-exclusive battle. It's quite the spectacle, but pretty easy, since because as Grendel in field battles, your health regenerates pretty rapidly. It would have been more exciting if your health didn't regenerate in this fight and you actually had to try, but that would also require a more competent action battle system. The final boss theme is worth mentioning as well, as it sounds like a song straight out of Nier Automata. I'll talk more about the music later too. After the fights are over, which all take place within the span of only 5 minutes because the bunker they are in has slowed down time, Kincaid, after thanking the president for employing him, teleports out to Trion Tower, where Agnes and Dominique are waiting. Like her mother and grandmother sacrificed their own health to help the world, Agnes plans to use herself as the key to preserving the world and preventing the Grand Reset. Nina and Ouroboros show up to witness, and Campanella drops a hint that this outcome is one he, and I assume the Grandmaster, have not seen. that this kind of climax has not happened before, implying that they are either immortal or able to exist across multiple time loops and can preserve their memories. The entire thing starts to glow, and what's this? Yume is approaching at just the right time, and her eyes are glowing again. Everyone connects and tries to talk Agnes out of it, which seems strange given they are staring down the barrel of the Grand Reset with literally 1 minute left until they're all gone. Well, tensions are super high, so I guess we can't expect everyone to think logically at this moment. Also, Van figured it out, that she wanted him to turn her down back in Act 2, so she could do this with no regrets. Damn. We get a couple of cut-ins, one of Yoon Ka-fai telling Reen to settle things with the Black God, and one over on Kevin's side, where one of the remnants takes off her mask, causing Marielle to recognize her. She's blonde. At first I thought it was Lilia or Sophie Claudel, but considering the two others with her, it might actually be Sheena Dirk, and that the other two are Atkinson and Aramis. I wouldn't have thought of that if not for my chat, to be honest, because the games make you picture Nina as Dirk more than anything, and she has dark hair. Well, I guess that will make these ones more interesting than the others, who are all just reused assets. Credit sequence now. Agnes becomes this angelic figure, and Yume is the last one to witness it, and her eyes stop glowing as soon as she does. Through the Genesis, Agnes is able to counteract or hack into the sept-terrion of time, causing only a limited regression rather than a 1200-year one, but at a cost. The first thing we see disappear is a lot of technology, first being a phone a girl is holding, second a bunch of cars, then everything begins to fade and reset in the light. We get a credit sequence showing a bunch of memories from the past 3 games, and then a couple of interesting oddities. The first being when Van and Agnes are on the rooftop during the confession. They are in opposite positions. The second is that the game then shows all these events in reverse, as if things are rewinding, all the way back to when Van and Agnes first met, and then she vanishes.
いつか帰る。あなたのために。
What the hell? I honestly still don't know if I like this cliffhanger ending or not. It feels like we've been here before, and we could be in for something ridiculous. Everything is going to depend on that next game, and I mean everything. Not just because of the Cold Steel 3 comparisons, but this whole story is kind of unprecedented. Things have gotten extremely convoluted, and they can take this in so many different directions, it's insane. Like, where will the next game start? Will it be back in 1208 before Van meets Agnes, meaning everything we've done up to this point in this arc, including every side quest, filler, content, and alignment choice, will be undone? Or will it start after the events of this game, and recap the events that occur without Agnes' presence? Will anyone remember what happened? It will be weird if everything is rewound to 1208, since they teased quite a lot of potential foreshadowing in this game, such as Arnold Evans visiting Calvard, or us meeting Enforcers number 5 and number 12. Or Reen going on to continue his battle with Shizuna. I think the game hinted at Yume being the only one who will remember Agnes, and she may be a driving force in the story this time. I would love nothing more. Trails to Yume, let's go. Okay, but for real, I have some serious concerns. Concerns that the next game will be an absolute cluster with time travel shenanigans, or that they are just going to undo everything bad that happened, further cementing the idea that nothing in this series matters or has any permanence or consequence. Hell, we had more characters brought back from the dead than there were character deaths, which could be potentially a big fat zero. The only dire scene we saw was in Blacklight during Act 2, when everyone's going berserk and there are a lot of dead, well, they're probably just unconscious. Haha. They'll ass pull away for Amelia to survive that wreck, and Agnes, technically not a death, but being erased from existence is potentially worse. She already said she'd come back someday at the end, so, you know, they'll probably magically remember her and bring her back with the power of friendship or something. Also, is the Sky remake on a different time loop from the original? And are they going to pull something even crazier? There's so many ways this could go south quick. And I hate to be that guy, but it wouldn't be the first time. And I do like to have the lowest expectations after all. On the other hand, there is the possibility that this could be something amazing. The chance is there. A lot of people don't seem to have any hope though, saying that this time loop plot means that the whole universe is just a simulation or that the entire story is ultimately pointless, and things like that. I'm not entirely convinced of that yet. It could be that the sept-terrions are just that powerful, that they can manipulate the world as if it was a simulation they have dominion over. Grahamhart did liken the sept-terrion of time itself to a god, which then turned this into another typical Japanese story about wanting to defeat God. Sort of. Probably just to make things dramatic. There are still so many unanswered questions that have been nagging at us since the first game, like what is Grendel and why does it exist? Who or what is Mare and why does she keep saying things we can't hear? What happened to Epstein? What does Van's inner demon have to do with all this? And even tons of things that have been unanswered for even longer, like why did the salt pail appear? Who is the Grandmaster and why is her plan so significant? How long will it take to get at least some of these answered? I'm quaking in my boots here. But hey, that's enough naysaying. This game did answer a lot of questions, although many of them were implied, not directly answered. For example, we learned the significance of sin, but not what it truly means or why the sept-terrion is measuring this value. But if it's sin as in evil deeds or malice or something of that nature, that could be our explanation as to why the element of time is associated with demons, darkness, and the underworld. The sept-terrion is constantly influenced by evil, and as previously mentioned by Melchior, it could be protecting the world as well as being its shackle for humanity, that the void it maintains around the world separates Zemuria from the beyond, where all sorts of unfathomable beings exist that could destroy everything. Devils as powerful as Vagrant Zion, the demon that Van is linked to. Or others, like another character who got mentioned multiple times throughout the game, McBurn, who is apparently from the beyond. But he has no recollection of his origins. I think it's likely that he will show up in the next game because of this, but we'll see. The value of sin was also something that was mentioned in the previous game, but we had no context for it. Grendel Zolga was an observer of this value, but there were still a few pieces missing. Admittedly, I did not pay attention to the story of that one as well as I should have. You can thank Act 3 for that. But if he was created by the 8th Genesis, it could mean that the 8th is responsible for keeping track of this value so that they know when exactly the Grand Reset will occur. But if part of the sept-terrion's functions is to measure and calculate things like a computer, it makes me wonder what the sept-terrions truly are. Are they also singularities created by the ancient people of Zemuria to control the 7 elements? Like the Oriole from the Sky trilogy is still a bit of an enigma. It's never fully explained how it works, but it seems to have been contained in and work with the LibreArc's fancy technology. I have to wonder if the goddess Aidios actually exists because we see the power of these sept-terrions is akin to divine power. But any actual evidence of the goddess being real is slim to none. Could the church just be using it as a ploy for their own ends? I don't know. It's always possible that there is a being more powerful than a black box that can manipulate the world into an infinite time loop. Another somewhat amusing implication I thought of: are the different choices we make with the Law Grey Chaos system also part of alternate realities or time loops? And by extension, our New Game Plus playthroughs are also on different time loops? Haha. One thing that sticks out about this story is how Campanella implies things are playing out differently. So what is so different about this particular time loop that causes this? It could be a number of things. Any of the events that happened in the past 2 games, or it could be Van's existence in general, or maybe it's Van rejecting Anya since that was portrayed as such a prominent event, or maybe it was something Hamilton did, or the existence of the Geneses themselves. Or does it go back to the singularity of Elysium, the alternate ending in Reen's story, or even as far back as Kia altering causality in Crossbell, or Kevin's journey through Phantasma, or maybe all of the above, including the everlasting power of friendship. And what the heck is going on with that figure in space, the shadowy being that looked a lot like Zoa Gilstein? Did Altarine going into space with Ishmelga inadvertently create this thing by being recorded by the sept-terrion of time? Or was this thing what pushed Altarine over the edge to become one with Ishmelga and create Zoa Gilstein? Someone had to remind me, but apparently Altarine tried to warn everyone of something, but Lloyd cut him off. It's all so muddy and convoluted now, isn't it? Like now we have some sort of explanation of artifacts. Mysterious objects with unexplainable powers. They are created via glitches, I guess would be one way to describe it, that occur during one of the grand resets or due to failed timelines. I'm not sure I like this explanation. I always thought artifacts were only from before the Great Collapse when people were able to make things in ways that the current people cannot understand. But some are being created by the time loops as well? This is weird. We did see one such thing potentially happen when Amelia's mech was about to crash into the earth, but then it disappears and is replaced with that statue, which looks like her mech, if it had decayed for hundreds of years, but we still don't know what happened to Amelia. One more thing we were suddenly introduced to was Kurogane's eyes, which seem to hold some significance or power that we don't know about yet. I wonder if it's similar to the unclouded eye that Shizuna goes on about. And another thing, is this unclouded eye a power that harnesses the element of time, being able to see into different time loops to have limited ability to predict the future? Is that also how these weebs are able to sense the presence of others? Is that also what spirit unification truly is? Unifying the spirits of their lost existences and other loops to also have heightened senses and reflexes or something. Lastly, what about those mech battles? We only got a handful of them, but are they even going to use it in the next game? This is a weird one, because one thing to notice when Agnes was doing her thing at the end, the first thing we see disappear is a phone, then cars, pieces of technology. What does this mean? Is she not only erasing herself but also Epstein's legacy? Or at least parts of it? Will this erase reset too? If she erases herself so that she doesn't exist, does that change the things that her mother did in the past too? Guys, this game is certainly interesting. I've never felt like I've been able to do a true deep dive on the lore of this series until now. This game definitely got me thinking and wondering and guessing about the next game quite a lot, which I don't tend to do. I usually just wait until it comes out, like I said I was going to do at the end of my final stream of this game. Maybe I just caught the Trails brain rot again. And I'll admit, I probably have a lot of this crap wrong. Hell, maybe everyone is wrong and they pull a fast one on us and give us a wild conclusion that nobody expected. I don't have my hopes that high though, but the chance is there. But I think I've wasted enough time spitballing at this point. Let me know in the comments what you think, or if there was anything important I missed. Going back to the gameplay for a bit, I do want to mention a few things, some of which may give away some cheap strategies to beating the game, so feel free to skip this if you spoiled the story for yourself but still plan to play it. You weirdo. I mentioned that for most of the game I had a tough time with some of the bosses, not because they were significantly challenging or anything, just that many boss fights took way too damn long. Like that turtle that took 45 minutes. It turns out, most of my woes were of my own doing. If you watched my streams, I was very meticulous in how I spread my courts to my party members, how I managed my equipment and spells, and in battle made sure to carefully place my characters, making sure to maximize the results as best I can. And it paid off. Despite bosses taking forever due to me being underpowered for most of the game, I still managed to complete Nightmare difficulty with only 3 game overs. 4 if you include the mech battle with Reen and Crow, but that's a completely different set of rules. Here are some of the things I didn't do. Gourmet ranks. I bought every food item but barely used any of it throughout the game. Increasing your gourmet rank boosts your party stats permanently, and if you get to the max level 30, it's pretty significant. I was about level 9 by the end of the game. Throughout the game you also get stat drops, items that permanently increase your stats by a little. I hoarded them, didn't use a single one. Haha. Another thing I never did was use U materials to upgrade weapons. I don't think this is very significant since I've never done this in any Trails game aside from maybe my first Cold Steel 1 playthrough back in 2015. The thing that probably hampered me the most is putting off the Grimgarten as much as possible. The rewards you get for focusing on this and completing it early are extremely significant, and there was a lot of stuff that could have helped me out. Like, even though I was anal about my quartz setups, the quartz I had at any given time were probably very lacking compared to what they should have been for wherever I was in the story. One of the main sources for the important dual element quartz was achievements, some of which are tied to combat milestones, and I barely scratched the surface of most of those until very late in the game. A few more things I did that also set me back, like not using Grendel at all, for most of the first half of the game just because I didn't want to. That turtle boss finally made me cave. I also did not go gambling at any casino at all. The casino rewards would have been quite handy if I had done it, but I just didn't. Because I didn't want to. Missed some achievements for that too, I did. Lastly, I used Chaos Mare as soon as I unlocked her for Van's Hollow Core. Chaos Mare is extremely good, like game-breaking even, but not until very late in the game. For the earlier parts, it would have been much more handy to use Grey Mare instead, since she has a great speed command. Chaos Mare has a magic one, which is not very useful at all by comparison. I don't think I ever used it once. All this is to say that despite me handicapping myself so much, I still only got game over 3 times. The games are too easy in general, when really they should be getting more challenging the later we get into the series if you ask me. And I think I figured out what the main cause is. It's the experience scaling. What I mean by that is this: if you are, say, level 5 fighting a level 5 monster, you'll gain a normal amount of experience, right? If you fight a level 10 monster at level 5 instead, the game will massively inflate the amount of experience the level 10 monster would normally give. On the other hand, if you fight monsters lower level than you, your experience will be pittance by comparison. Normally this kind of system isn't really a problem. It reduces the need to grind repeatedly to make your character stronger. But this game, as well as the previous one due to Martian Garten, actively encourage you to grind or just to go to the garden and go wild fighting stuff. But if you do this, you get caught up in levels after only a small handful of fights, and if you continue, you will soon become overpowered, which then takes the fun out of it because it becomes even easier than it already is. On the other hand, if you're like me, things become annoying because bosses have inflated HP compared to the amount of damage output you actually have. Balancing these games has to be a nightmare, pun intended. I think they should change the way things work based on what difficulty you play on. If you pick hard or nightmare, there should be less EXP scaling, maybe no scaling on nightmare. And one thing that makes it a bit too safe when you're in a dungeon zone: when you level up, you get a full heal automatically. On hard or nightmare, this should be removed. Gives you more incentive to use the items you've been hoarding if you're anything like me, just saying. On Nightmare, they could also introduce alpha versions of monsters that appear every now and then, just to give random battles more intensity. Just some random ideas I had. One thing that's sorely missing is the ability to choose your starting formation in battle. It sounds redundant since you can move and attack in the same turn now, but it actually screws you over hard sometimes, since no matter what, your characters all start super close together, and get jumped by bosses on turn 1. That was annoying sometimes. When I redid the fight with Yun Ka-Fai, he nearly took out my entire party on turn 1, and because he's so quick, he also went on turn 2, and his moves hit such a wide area. If this is intentional, why am I able to just restart the game until I get to go on turn 1? Which I did. Shamelessly. Despite this, there are some seriously broken builds you can make in this game. The reason why that one-on-one Shizuna fight was so pathetically easy was because my van was so utterly broken he could manipulate the turn orders so that even some of the late game bosses barely got to move. I had a run of the 9th floor Garten boss where I was able to continuously attack and it only got 1 turn in. Using a combination of Chaos Mare, Altera's ultimate wind command, and quartz that reduce his S-craft delay combined with a bunch of delay effects, shard skills that automatically restore CP, especially that auto impassion guard, and some nice late game accessories, he was unstoppable. There was also a glitch, I think, that if you S-break after Grendel's last turn before reverting to normal van, it will give him an extra free turn. So then he could immediately go Grendel again and just continue to lay waste to everything. It was a beautiful disaster. Rien was also another character that was utterly broken on my playthrough since his default hollow core also reduces his S-craft delay. I also gave him a quartz that did the same thing, and then I'd use Spirit Unification, or Spirit Goonification as we like to call it now.
You need to goon.
ZOC, Autumn Slash to restore CP, activate a speed command, use another craft, S-break, then get a turn sooner than I would otherwise by S-breaking, usually right after his S-craft and before the enemies could even move. Some battles were over before they started with Rien. Haha. However, when it came to derping around in the Grim Garden, the character I liked using the most was actually Judith. Now, she was decent in previous games, but in this game she seems to have gotten a significant damage buff overall when using her Grimcat's form, at the cost of it only lasting 9 turns in battle. Maybe I'm just remembering this wrong, I don't know, but Judith was definitely one of my best characters this time, and definitely my favorite to use in field battles. It has nothing to do with staring at her ass in that cat costume, I swear. Kevin was an interesting character to use as well, and I am very biased towards him, but I actually tended not to use him as much as I expected. He's good, but not busted, and his best move is probably his craft that gives one character 3 immunity shields. If you can get him enough early turns and set them up on all 4 of your characters, the enemy's gonna struggle if they don't have an all cancel. Another character I thought was really good was Altina. Probably one of the best defensive supports in the game that essentially takes over Kevin's Grail Sphere S-craft from Sky SC in the 3rd. Very different from my Cold Steel 4 magic tank build for her where she had over 40,000 HP. She's also fun to use in field battles, surfing on her shield combat shell and firing giant lasers. Rufus was another character I always had in my party in the Grim Garden, mainly because I gave him the Altera core, but also he's another one of, if not the best, offensive support in the game. With his boost restoring craft giving extra defense buffs so you're more safe even without a defense command up, an all-cancel normal craft, and his S-craft which dealt massive amounts of stun damage, and was amusing to look at. On the other hand, I remember Rishia being really busted in Reverie, but she's gotta be one of the worst characters in this game, if not the worst overall. She's probably one of the least versatile offensive characters in the game, with poor defense and crafts that don't give her much utility like before. Now, one of the problems with her is that the game actively discourages you from investing in her since she is not a party member in the story except in very small periods of time. This also applies to Zin, who is really bad in any fight that has more than one enemy because his craft range is absolutely pitiful. His only saving graces are being able to tank, which is a role he's still outclassed by Van and Burgard in, and he can still deal a decent amount of damage to single enemies like bosses. He does have a strange charge attack in field battles that hits like 4 times and does massive damage, so there's that. But at the end of the day, you can pretty much build whoever you want into a competent team with the right setups. Like I mentioned earlier, there's such a wide variety of potential team compositions that can work, so go wild and have fun. If I were to play the Kuro arc a second time, I think I'd try to beat the game without using Van. That would be interesting. Or a slog. One of the two. Probably a slog. The music in this game is overall very nice. It's a step up from the previous game and very close to Daybreak 1. In particular, this game does a great job at establishing a relaxing urban vibe, especially around Edith. I adore most of the new city themes in this game. The new theme for Edith Old Town has a different feel from the previous one. Rather than being sullen and down-tempo, it's catchy and wistful. I love it, and it did a good job capturing the idea that this old place has a new outlook, with all the main characters working together and improving themselves in various ways. Basil got a new theme when Reen and crew are there, and it's also great. It's reminiscent of town themes from the older games, so it's quite fitting, like hearing the music of Calvard from a familiar foreign perspective. Tharbat also got a new theme, and it's very easy listening compared to the old one. Gives you the feel that you're on a vacation or something. Aside from that, Kevin got a battle theme all to himself that's very reminiscent of the style of Sky the Third, and it rocks. On the other hand, the game does have its share of annoying songs, and what I like to call sing-a-slop. The more I hear from this guy, the more I get all the complaints. That Anchorville theme is just bizarre as hell. But he does have a few songs in the game that are good as well, like the new Tharbad theme I mentioned, as well as the Shardine District. But there's one song that may have some significant plot relevance that I'd like to hear more of in the next game. Autumn Knows. There's actually a few interesting scenes where this song is played by characters in-game, and Judith actually sings it, though they don't let us hear it, so we don't know the lyrics yet, if they even exist. Of course, the other track that sticks out is the final boss theme, Dies Irae, Juncture to the Dawn, which I mentioned earlier. Allegedly, this song was made by Takahiro Unisuga, who left Falcom quite some time ago, but was never used until now, and it's surprising how fitting the song is here if that's true. It's like what if Nier Automata met El Shaddai, ironically since it plays during the fight with Grendel Shaddai, and doesn't sound like anything Falcom at all. This makes me wonder how much music they have in the vaults at this point. Many of the recent Trails games use songs that were made for older games but went unused. And if some of them are as good as this final boss theme, and many of the other great songs that were old assets, I can't really complain all that much. Though, one commenter on my channel pointed out that the newer games have been weak in the motif usage since Cold Steel 2, and I can kinda see it. The one song that comes closest to this is probably the one I mentioned, Autumn Knows, which is why I hope it will see increased usage in the next game. Having good game music is one thing, but making it part of the story helps connect us to the world, and the last time a song was used in this way was The Whereabouts of Light from Trails in the Sky. Unless I'm forgetting something. I hope they do this some more. I mean, it is part of the reason why games like Ocarina of Time, Final Fantasy X, and Artanelico are considered legends in the music department. Let's talk about the characters. We had a lot of returning characters as well as a few new ones, and for the most part the new ones are okay-ish overall, I guess. It really doesn't seem fair to rate them at this point in the story. Maybe I should have saved this segment until after the next game, but nah, I think it will be more interesting this way. As you may know, I made a tier list at the end of my previous video about Daybreak 2, so I decided to make a new one here too. It'll be interesting to see where they all move around as the series moves along, right? The format is the same, rank S is the highest, rank F is the lowest, and the extra C- tier is for characters whose relevance in the story is too minimal to rate. I had to recreate the tier list using a newer version though, and this one is missing a few that the previous had. Najee, Regina, Kisara, Aslan, and Isabel, but those are mainly C tiers anyway. I have to admit, for a lot of the reintroduced characters, their placement is heavily based on where I placed them in my old character list, which I still mostly agree with. Kevin is still one of my all-time favorite characters in general. This game doesn't do a whole lot to change my opinion of him in either direction, except I do have one concern. The fact that he left Reese out of his mission because he wanted her to stay on the straight and narrow is going to play out in a very predictable and annoying way. I just know it. Like when Van went out on his own to contact C at the end of Daybreak 2 in spite of everything he went through. You just know that Reese is going to scold him and say she wants to work with him regardless, like everyone did to Van. Rufus I've always liked, and this game changed nothing about that really. He's kind of a tag-along in this game and doesn't have much relation to the overall story aside from being friends with Swin and Nadia. Altina was, and still is, one of the best Cold Steel girls. She's also pretty much the same. Crow, a character I've always liked when he's not dying in battle. I actually almost forgot to include him here, so that shows how relevant he is in the story now. Reen is Reen. The man, the meme, the legend. I know he's the poster boy for this series' cringe, but as a character, he's always been pretty okay in spite of his harem shenanigans. Mint coming back was a source of comedy, and that's about it. But I can't really complain. Wouldn't mind seeing more of this silly Tism machine goblin. Novartis. Now, this is a tough one. Prior to this, he wasn't all that memorable to me because he always came off as a typical crazy genius villain. Now, I don't know what to think. The moment at the end of Grimgarten humanized him more than any of his other appearances, and now I think he is quite the interesting character. I actually hope to see more of him in the next game, and I think we will. Campanella. I should like him because I like mysterious sussy boy characters like that, but he's too much of an enigma still. And here, he's the same as he's always been. Lastly, we have the Grandmaster of Ouroboros, and she still hasn't had enough screen time or actually done anything aside from directing the Anguis, as far as we know. Her interactions with Novartis were interesting. She seems to care about him to a degree, as if he's an adopted child of hers or something, and acts in a very oddly benevolent way. I don't know. The jury's still out on this one. As for current characters, there are a few that moved down some spots for me. Rosalie being Gilbert 2 is annoying. I always thought Gilbert was just too cartoony, and Rosalie is pretty much the same. Quatre moved down a few spots, but not by too much. He doesn't have any good or bad moments in this game, but the side content is just what seems to be a modern-day trans allegory or something. This sucks because he could be an interesting character because of his circumstances, but this ain't it. Also, one thing I noticed that really bugs me, his hands are massive. Like, why? I can't not notice it anymore, haha. Last, Melchior. I dropped into B tier for coming back to life-ish. Same goes for the other Almada members, they all moved down, but they were mainly C tier and just moved further down the C tier. As for characters that moved up, Roy, Nina, Amelia, Hamilton all played great parts in the story, especially Hamilton, who became a much more interesting character throughout this game. Judith and Reset are finally becoming more involved in the main story, and I especially like where Reset is going, but I want to see more. The biggest jump for me was easily Agnes. Prior to this game, she was just kind of mid, not a very interesting character in terms of personality. Now, though, after the whole confession scene and her sacrificing herself at the end, oh man, I can't wait for them to ruin this somehow. But most importantly, Yume. I can't get enough of this precious little bundle of joy, and now she may be a more important character in the next game? Welcome to S tier. I can't help it, chat, she's too powerful. Anyway, for the new characters, Yoon Ka-fai technically isn't a new character, but this is the first time he's ever appeared in person, and he was quite entertaining. I like him. Ragoon Khan makes an appearance as one of the remnants, but like everything involving Heiwei and adjacent plotlines, I just don't care. We also have Enforcer number 7 of Ouroboros, Simeon, the Imaginator. I don't know how to feel about this guy yet. He's definitely intimidating in a unique, mysterious way, and I remember someone saying that he is one of the most dangerous enforcers out there due to his abilities. He can basically conjure up anything he wants using those crystal fragments, which sounds ridiculously OP. Even gave Shizuna a run for her money. I'll have to wait and see for more. Oh yeah, Shizuna is still F tier. Yeah, she had that moment with her demon sword, but it's not enough. She still sucks the tension out of the important scenes she's involved in, and intrudes on everyone with her antics when you don't want it. Falcom's still got a long ways to go before I can ever like this character, and I don't think they'll be able to do it. So yeah, you can see here how the tier list evolved since Daybreak 2 as I played through the game. That about wraps up this segment. Oh wait, we're forgetting someone, aren't we? Okay, I didn't think they could manage it, but they did it. Enforcer number 18, Ulrika, the Influencer. F tier. Fuck this bitch. Seriously, it's like they set out to make the most annoying, most cringe, most hateable character ever. Well, congratulations, you succeeded. Yes, even below Shitsuna. We'll see if that changes in the next one. Somehow I doubt it. So yeah, there you have it. That's my final tier list for all the Calvert Arc characters, new and returning, with a few omissions. Hope you get salty. While we're on the topic of characters, there does seem to be a bit of a debate on something, and it's been a prominent topic amongst the fans for quite some time. Van seems to have a bit of a harem problem. So in case you were curious, who do I think is the best match for him? Well, this game definitely gave us some things to think about, and my answer is... I don't care. Moving on. Okay, fine. I know I don't tend to have strong opinions on this kind of stuff, and I'll generally opt for whichever choice would fit the story best, or would make the story more interesting. That was part of my reasoning for choosing Toa for Rin in the previous arc, but I don't really agree with that anymore. I have a hard time picturing Rin with anyone other than Altina now. She seems to be at his side more than anyone. They're like partners in crime and everything. So they're probably the best fit. He'll just have to wait one more year. Surely he can continue to be as oblivious as ever until then. Or he can just accept who he really is and bang Crow like he's always wanted. But for Van, there really are only two options that make the most sense, that being Agnes or Elaine. Since the first game, I always thought it would be best if Van and Elaine got back together, and especially after that one Connect event they had in this game where Van talks about how his connection to Elaine was one of the things that got him through the DG cult's torture. But Agnes really put the works on him in this episode, so it made me rethink that quite a bit. Honestly, it could go either way at this point. And I wasn't exactly joking when I said I don't care earlier. I just want the story to be good. That's what really matters the most, right? But of course, that doesn't mean those are his only options. I could see him with Reset or even Ren as well. They both seem to like him quite a lot. Though in Ren's case, she could just be putting on an act for fun. They do have some interesting history with each other if you remember some of their backstory. Reset, on the other hand, doesn't show much emotion and is pretty stoic compared to pretty much every other main character. But she and Van make a great team in so many ways, it would seem very fitting if not for the two main bachelorettes. Shitsuna placed herself into Van's harem against his will, like how she normally operates. I doubt they would go anywhere though, but even I will admit she's not the worst option for him. Judith is also around, but she doesn't seem to show any romantic interest towards anyone from what I remember. Then there's Fairy. Oh boy. Yeah, Fairy doesn't exactly show any romantic interest towards anyone either, and she's only like 14 in this game, so that's to be expected. But her family members seem to want to ship her with Van for some reason. Yeah, she's considered an adult already in her culture, but man, you can like slow down, you know? There's also Sarah from Tharbad. She has the hots for Van as well. Definitely not gonna happen. They barely interact with each other. Emilia, if she's not dead. But she seems to flirt with everyone, so she's the secret true harem protagonist we don't get to play as. And for all you Fujoshis out there, Quatre seems to have some sus feelings when Van gets close to him. Also, Aaron and Van have a few moments. And there's always Bermati. Go wild, shippers, I guess. Weirdos. But I'm gonna take the easy way out and not settle on an actual choice just yet. Too bad, maybe next game. I'm still leaning towards Elaine. What I will do that I didn't do in previous videos is bring up my tier list for the games themselves. Here you go. Most of this shouldn't be too surprising if you've been following the channel and heard my takes on each game. So where would I place Kai? It's a tough one. I'm not going to fall for the trap like I did the last time we had an unhappy cliffhanger ending in Cold Steel 3. Where this game ultimately places will very much depend on how it's followed up. Is that unfair? Probably. But I'm going to place it as is anyway. And I'd put it right here. I like most of the gameplay improvements over the last game. Made it fun to play around with, which is what pushes it above the middle of the road. I actually wanted to keep playing it after I beat it, and I did. Doesn't happen very often. That's where this Mishi Van ending footage I have came from. Haha. A few more things before I wrap this up. If I got anything wrong, let me know in the comments. I don't actually get to talk in depth about this series very much because I'm not part of the mainstream fan base, and to be honest, I don't plan on changing that. Every interaction over the internet I've had regarding this series was due to people finding my videos, and for that, I thank you for the opportunity. This is a fun series to be into, despite my numerous gripes with it. I know I said I think I hate anime earlier, so it's kind of ironic how invested I am in this very anime series in spite of all the little things that annoy me. Well, some of them aren't so little if you ask me, so maybe I actually don't hate anime. Maybe there's just a disconnect somewhere. Like, I know I'm not really the target audience as a mid-30s Westerner, but what alternatives do I have that I haven't played yet that will give me the same level of investment and intrigue? These games, which were made for Japanese teenagers, tell a better story and create a more interesting universe than the vast majority of Western slop made for adults that comes out every year anyway. I guess now, and I've said this before on stream and such, this series is kind of like my cozy game series. Whenever I play a new one, I just get lost in it and enjoy the ride, even if it moves and plays just like the last one. I don't think about it too much and just have fun. This game definitely changed that to a degree. I honestly can't wait for the next one, whether it's an amazing conclusion or an utter disaster, and I don't think I've felt this way since Cold Steel 3's cliffhanger, but that's exactly why I'm worried that it will be another disappointment like Cold Steel 4. This arc is so much different from Cold Steel that I want to say it won't be, but, well, only time will tell. The next game on the horizon is the Trails in the Sky remake, which I will be covering. Kind of obligated to, since I keep saying Sky is the best arc still to this day. But it will probably be on stream. I don't think I'll make a big video on it like this one. Unless they do something crazy and retcon a bunch of stuff or make it into a different loop or something. I dread the thoughts. Thank you all for watching, especially if you sat through this whole thing. I know this took a long time to make, but it was so much more difficult to get my full thoughts out on it compared to pretty much any other Trails game. Feel free to subscribe for more if you're into this series, because this certainly won't be the last video I make on it, even if it will take quite some time for the next one. But if you're interested, don't forget to check out some of my other content, such as my top 10s, which you may have already seen some of, like my top 100 Trails songs or my top 10 favorite and least favorite Trails moments videos, or a similar top 10 favorite moments in The Legend of Zelda, or my recently released top 10 favorite video game music covers. Or you can catch RNG, Random News of Gaming, which I make once a month and go over all the happenings in the industry, roast some bad takes, and finish off with all the new releases that came out within the last month. Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video and share it around to anyone who may be interested. Or a dislike if you're a Shizuna simp or you donated to Ulrika's OnlyFans. You can hop in my Discord server if you want to share fanfictions about me dating whichever character from the series. No, I didn't just make that up, that actually happened already. And I even have a new Falcom exclusive channel there, just saying. Follow me on the X Twitter where I post a massive void of nothingness, or catch my video content on Rumble or Odyssey. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Just